On the 17th of May 2005, Imperial Glory was released 4 years before Empire Total War ever came to be. Both very similar in nature and beloved by their fan bases. So, the question I put to you today, did Imperial Glory really inspire Total War, or was it the other way round? So, what is Imperial Glory? Well, it's a grand strategy game similar to that of Total War, with a strategic campaign map and 3D land and naval gameplay. It was based in the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars era in the time of muskets. You were able to take control of multiple nations such as the British, French, Austrians, Russians, and of course the Prussians. The goal, like many other strategy games, to take over and conquer. Could be Europe, Africa, or even the Middle East. Units would consist of formations of infantry, which would consist of a variation of militia, light infantry, and grenadiers. However, this is just the start. Not only that, but you could have artillery and cavalry units, such as lancers and hussars, and of course the 6-pounder cannons and howitzers to further your army. Additionally, there were naval vessels in full ship-to-ship warfare. Combat itself would consist of these lines of musket-bearing infantry, firing volley after volley after volley, with players having the option to switch to bayonets if needed to charge down the enemy. Troops were able to take cover behind fences, walls, and garrison structures for extra protection from gunfire, artillery, or of course that dastardly cavalry. But all this does not mean that there can't be a peaceful way to play this game. Maybe diplomacy is more your option. You could go into the democracy tabs, forming alliances, setting up trade routes for commerce, or auto-resolving every single battle if that's more your thing, and playing the game as a grand strategy on its own. The reception of this game, however, was not the best. Imperial Glory mainly received an average score, with GameSpot noting the lack of a morale system, meaning that your men basically just turn into mindless robots, and not very smart ones either. They rounded off the review with Imperial Glory shows a lot of untapped promise and potential, but it also possesses raw edges and missed opportunities. It's still an enjoyable game, though, as long as you're willing to overlook its flaws. So, how does this compare to its bigger, yet younger brother, Empire Total War? Well, Empire Total War was released 4 years later, on the 3rd of March 2009. It was based on the early modern period of the 18th century, similar to previous Total War games, being able to have this big campaign map and of course that 3D combat battle element. However, unlike previous games, it was the first to add naval battles, which later became the staple of the series. Well, until they then unfortunately took it out again. During its development, however, they used a new game engine to help with the real-time naval combat and the introduction of gunpowder. However, the full announcement of Empire Total War came on the 28th of October 2008, and of course it was released on Steam for PC on the 3rd of March 2009. Then, in September of that same year, a DLC pack called The Warpath was announced, and soon after that we got an Empire Total War spin-off called Napoleon Total War, which solely focused on the Europeans of North and Central Europe. On release, however, Empire Total War was the fastest selling game in the franchise to date. It topped the British video game sales charts for all platforms in the week of its release, and the first PC exclusive title to do so in a year and a half. It sold double the number of Rome Total War and Medieval 2 Total War. In the US, Empire Total War and its Special Forces edition were ranked as first and second retrospectively in PC sales charts for that week of release. The game sold 810,000 units worldwide during their first year period of 2008. Reviews were interesting for this one. In terms of sights, it was praised for its graphical quality and of course the naval battles, a completely new and original step for the Total War franchise that many people didn't really expect. However, it was infamous by its player base for being one of the buggiest games down to the new engine. It was fine for musket warfare, but when it came to clashing, when it came to scaling buildings and using siege weaponry, there were many issues. However, despite criticism, most reviews overall were positive, and whilst it was stated there were many problems, the completely new direction for Total War carried the game to getting 9 out of 10 reviews and 89% on Steam. So after all this, there are many differences between these two games. For a start, Imperial Glory doesn't have the in-depth morale systems that Total War does. It also is somewhat on a smaller scale as well. However, Imperial Glory also does have some better features. There was a much bigger difference between elite rifle units and of course your peasant militia, being mowed down in seconds, whereas in Total War it was a little bit different. Being able to swamp with weak units was always a possibility and still kind of is to this day. There are a few standard features though that Imperial Imperial Glory just never had. It never quite had that polish and in-depth feeling of the Total War games, specifically Empire. I mean, Imperial Glory didn't even have a pause combat feature. One of the most necessary things to be able to freeze time and take a breath, be able to move your troops, unpause it, and those units will move into the position you stated. There's also no speed up time feature, which can be a deal breaker, as you can be waiting for 5 to 10 minutes for your units just to set up into the right position. And whilst a game like Napoleon Total War did have the ability to hide people in buildings, Imperial Glory did that all the way back in 2005, garrisoning your musketmen behind walls, buildings, or behind fences. And there are a few things like this that make it seem like almost a less polished, but a base for many of the ideas that Empire Total War came to adopt. Of course, Total War had a much bigger budget. It was a much more stable franchise at this point, so it brought in better graphics, it brought in much more in-depth gameplay, and of course an attachment to a wider series as a whole. But Imperial Glory started this musket strategy stuff, and it did it, well, pretty well. So at the end of the day, what do I think? Well, I think it's fair to say that whilst Imperial Glory had many good ideas and it was a fantastic game, it could have been a lot more, but the technology just wasn't there at that point. And Empire Total War was able to expand on it with the resources that Creative Assembly had at the time. Despite this though, it was still one of the most infamous launches in the Total War franchise until, of course, Rome 2 came about. But hey, it was still a vast improvement on what Imperial Glory had. But let me know what you think. Comment down below and share your opinion. I know a lot of people played Imperial Glory back in the day, but it seems to be kind of lost to time, especially since Pyro Studios, the developer, went defunct in 2017. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, leave a dislike if you didn't. But until then, I will see you in the next one.